Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started because we want to make sure that we honor the time that we had allotted for this. So first of all, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Bert Lumbreras. I'm the city manager for the city of San Marcos. I want to welcome the Workforce Housing Task Force members and thank you for your service and your interest to be a part of this community initiative. So we've got a packed agenda for you for the next couple of hours, so we want to make sure that we use our time wisely. Also want to thank many of the members of the audience that are here as well. So what I want to start off with is just to kind of kick it off and give you a little bit of context, a little bit of background, a little bit of history around this whole initiative of workforce housing. What you'll see later on, we have staff that will provide a presentation. We have a facilitator here that's going to help guide us throughout this whole process, not only for this meeting, but for future meetings, to make sure that we capture, the intent of this distinguished group, and then also moving forward, all of the different strategies and the ideas to make sure that we're following through on the direction that we as a group want to go. But before we get started, one of the first things that we want to do, because this is a new group, this is our first meeting, we want to give you an opportunity, if you don't mind, just quickly introduce yourself, tell us who you're with, and we'll go around, and then I'll kick it off from there. So, Sean, you want to start us off?
Sure. Sean Garrettson. I actually live in Austin, Texas, and I'm one of your speakers today.
My name is Ryan Pearl. I'm a senior operations manager at Amazon and also San Marcos resident.
I'm Will Holberg. I'm a San Marcos resident and a Texas State graduate and a retired home builder and residential land developer from Houston.
My name is Melissa Nice-Warner Daly. I am a proud San Marcos resident and I am the executive director of Homemade Austin.
I'm Gloria Salazar. I'm the program coordinator for Centro Cultural Hispano de San Marcos. I also live here.
Andrew Fernandez with San Marcos CISD. I'm the executive director of communications and community relations.
Robert Watts, Director of Regional Operations for Habitat for Humanity.
I'm Jack Seaboard. I'm an architect. I live here in San Marcos, and I'm also affiliated with Habitat for Humanity.
My name is Gary Winnick, and I'm a professor in the construction programs coordinator at Texas State University. We have 539 students in the program. We do work with Ramp Texas, so we put handicap ramps for several homes in San Marcos. We also work with Bobcat Bill, and we have remodeled the VFW and working some other things around town. And also, I used to be on the board and worked on with Habitat for a while. And so I'm one of the executives. I know it's one that I worked on. So I think we can help with this with the construction business.
Roland Salcedo, I'm a neighborhood advocate, lifelong resident of San Marcos, Texas. And I'll be here.
Ramika Adams, I'm a resident of San Marcos. This month makes 10 years now. I am on the board of directors of the Calabrese Museum, and I'm also a realtor and a small business owner here in San Marcos as well. Happy to be here.
I'm Laura DuPont, and I'm a senior vice president at Corridor Title and Development Operations. I've been here for 28 years. My degree says Southwest Texas State.
There you go.
Anyway, I'm excited to be part of this discussion.
Good afternoon, Monica Valadez. I'm with SMCISD Community and Attendance Liaison and resident of San Marcos since 2011.
My name is Ruben Garza. I'm the executive director of Southside Community Center. I think this is my 38th year in San Marcos, 32 as director, and my degree says Southwest Texas.
My name is Albert Sierra. I'm with San Marcos Housing Authority. I've been there since 1981. Also a graduate of Texas State University.
I'm John Shelby. I'm the Marcos resident of Frost Bank here in San Marcos. I'm born and raised in San Marcos and a Hays County resident. Looking forward to getting involved.
Hi, my name is Darrell Lozo. I'm a home builder in the Canyon Lake area. Recently re-transferred myself back to Texas in San Marcos.
Caitlin Strickland, county planner for the Hays County Development Services Department.
My name is Andrea Villalobos. I'm a business owner from San Marcos and I'm with city staff and I'm a planner with the Planning Health Services.
My name is Tom Lombardi. I'm a professor at Texas State University, and my
contact with housing policies, worked on some capacity building with farm labor housing organizations in West Texas, and have worked on some healthy homes initiatives in certain counties. Chapter here.
My name is Abby Gilcon. I'm the planning manager for the city of San Marcos.
My name is Rebecca Leonard. I own a company named Lionheart. I'll be the facilitator for
Well, again, welcome to each and every one of you, and again, thank you very much for providing this community service and working with the city in terms of helping guide us on this very important issue of workforce housing. So I can't thank you enough, and on behalf of the City Council, thank you for your service. So again, just to set the stage and talk a little bit of context and history, just to give you a little bit of background, going back a little over a year before I came to the city, did a lot of research in terms of the city plans and priorities. I had a lot of individual discussions, not only with our elected officials, our city council, and our mayor, a lot of the folks in the community. And quickly, it became pretty evident to me that there was a huge issue that we as a community should want to pay attention to, and that is the area of workforce housing. The City Council back in January of this year had an advance. We like to call our get-togethers advances because instead of retreats, because we want to be moving forward, not going backwards, so that's why we call them advances. And in that advance, in their visioning, they talked about what are the priorities that we want to focus in on, at least as a strong focus for the next 12 to 18 months. Now, that doesn't mean that we're done and it's finished, but what is the primary focus and what is the primary attention for that period of time? And so we looked at 5, and the council selected all 5 of these. They eventually adopted them several months later. City facilities, stormwater drainage, community partnerships, seamless public transit system, and then of course workforce housing, which is a topic that we're going to talk about today. I probably don't need to mention this to this group, but I want to set the stage in terms of the impact that I believe is important and very relevant to the issue around workforce housing. When you look at it, workforce housing to me breaks the lower income cycle levels that are existing by placing first-time home buyers in new homes. And I can tell you personally, by having to deal with this initiative for many, many years, nothing warms my heart than to see somebody for the first time experiencing that new home. And even to the extent of keeping families in existing homes. The other thing is that it strengthens our neighborhoods. It improves the quality of life. That is so critical to a community like San Marcos. It creates wealth within existing family incomes. A lot of times, their incomes are going towards rental and not an investment. So it provides an opportunity for a solid investment. It also changes what we believe is a significant imbalance of renters and homeowners that make up our percentages of people living in San Marcos. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. It gives families what I believe a fighting chance to have a stable and a safe home for their kids, where they in turn become the fabric of our communities and our neighborhoods that we so desperately want. So when you look at some of our existing evident demographics, one very striking one is 70% of our population are renters and 30% are homeowners. The other one is when you look at our median family income in our community as compared to other cities in our region, we're the lowest. When you look at what half of our families can afford, and then you compare that to the median home price for a house and a condo that is sold, there is a huge gap. And staff will present that in their PowerPoint. There's a huge gap between what is out in the market, what is being sold, and what the families, over half of our families, can afford. And that's something that we have to pay attention to. And then when you look at the changes in our housing market, it's obviously very heavy on development pressures to many of our neighborhoods in favor of rentals. And you see blocks that are being developed, where single family homes are removed. And you see even a single family unit that is converted into rental. The housing market overall is healthy, and that's great. And we love our housing market. But it is important to note that A focus should be on generating the right stock for the right price quality homes for our community for this specific demographic. Because I would venture to say that if all of us were to survey some of our employees, some of the people around us, a lot of people fall in that category when we talk about workforce housing. You might say, what is your definition? It's very simple. It's not subsidized, and it's not executive or at the higher end. It's in the middle. It's people that are every day out there struggling to, keep their jobs, put food on the table, get through life, and with very little income, being able to get into a home that I believe that they deserve. And then also the inability of us having what I believe is a strong focus program to supply the right priced quality homes for our workforce that truly need it the most. So what is the plan? How do we change that demographic? From the 70% renters and the 30% homeowners, how do we change that? That's part of the strategy or the focus. Also, how do we work and build capacity or have the city take the lead to partner with a sustainable nonprofit or even the development community to help build these homes, to sustain it and keep it going? And then how do we use a collaborative approach? That's where you come in. The partners, the community, all of the folks that have certain levels of expertise, that have great ideas. How do we get you around this issue and help us to solve this community problem? This is not a City of San Marcos issue. This is a community problem. This is something that we all should be concerned with. How do we create those right programs? How do we develop those right strategies, those tools, those incentives? How do we solidify partnerships? And then how do we get to the right level for the people that need it the most? So your help is going to be invaluable to guide us with the best way to do this. And at the end of the day, the very best workforce housing blueprint for our community moving forward. So that's what your task is. If you were to ask me, just very simply, what is the task for today and moving forward with all these meetings, is how do we create the very best workforce housing blueprint for our community? I don't know about you, but I love challenges, right? And I think this is a challenge that we can tackle because we've got some excellent minds, we've got some excellent committed people here, and I firmly believe that we can get there. Let me just mention one quick story and I'll turn it over to Rebecca, our facilitator. It's a story about one of our companies that's located here, Epic Piping. When they were coming in, well, to give you a little bit of background, they're one of the largest privately owned turnkey pipe fabrication firms in the world. They service the power, chemical refining, offshore, and oil and gas industries. They incorporate very high-end welding technology, even robotic cutting. And at the time that they were coming in, they were looking at employing anywhere from 300 to 400 employees. Currently, right now, they're in about a 300,000 square foot facility on 42 acres. At the time, they were partnering with Gary Job Corps, because the right employee for them were students that were fresh out of school, that they could provide this very customized, very specialized training. And so Gary Job Corps stepped up, and they were taking as many students as they can produce, and then they ran into a roadblock. And the roadblock is, if you can only imagine, if you're a student and you have no credit history, you don't have a lot of money saved up, and you don't have anywhere to live, but you have the potential for a job, then there's a problem. And the problem was very evident. The issue around having the right type of housing for these students that needed to get into the job market, an employer that needed these employees to start off their business, and we had that problem. So this example specifically highlights the current challenges that we had then and we still have today, of not having the availability of workforce housing for the residents that need it the most. So that's it for my part. Let me turn it over to Rebecca, and then she'll lead us through the rest of the afternoon. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you. Thanks to everybody for coming out to the first of 5 meetings for the Workforce Housing Task Force. Let me just practice my rule number 1 would always be practice this first. But first of all, let's talk about the agenda. Good news, we're already 2 items in, so the meeting's moving right along. Bert did some welcoming I'm just going to go over a little bit about the process here. Abby is going to talk to you about what the city is already doing in terms of workforce housing initiatives and how they've identified the gap that we are tasked with finding policies and programs to help fill. And then Sean Gerritsen is going to do a dialogue with you all about why this is so important for San Marcos to focus on workforce housing and what the benefits are of doing that. We'll come back together again. We'll talk about the vision statement and the goals, which are printed in your packet here. We've taken a first stab at them, sifting through the material that has led to the formation of this workforce housing task force. But we want you to put your fingerprints on it and make sure they're the right goals and the right vision. And then we'll conclude with some next steps here. So, and just a spoiler alert here, one of the next steps is selecting a co-chair, a chair and a co-chair for this task force. So be thinking about that as you are listening to everything going on today and start to kind of feel your own passion around this. We're looking for 2 great leaders. And so at the end of the meeting, we'll be taking some nominations for that. So let's see, moving, lasering Abby, sorry. Okay, so rules for the meeting. These are just so that we can make these meetings as productive as we can. We know you're taking time out of your lives to be a part of this. We know there's a lot of territory to cover in 5 meetings, and so we want to make sure that they're efficient and effective. And so, first of all, everyone participates. You're here for a reason. We think you have really good points of view to share on this topic, and we want to hear them. Please don't sit there and be too shy or be concerned. This is the time to really flesh those out and really understand how they fit into the broader context of workforce housing. These are open to the public, but this is a task force meeting. So the public comments will be collected on comment cards, and there are some available at the sign-in table back there, and we will make sure that the task force has those questions and comments during this process, and they'll be available on the website, I believe, as well. But we want to make sure that the meetings stay focused on the production of the workforce task force, the workforce housing task force. Stay focused. That's just, there's a lot of ways this can kind of spin off into other topics, and we do want to keep bringing it back to workforce housing. How is what we're talking about relating to workforce housing? They're pretty packed meetings from the looks of them, so when you need a break, just feel free to step out and take a break. We won't be building in breaks in the 2-hour work sessions, okay? Any questions about the meeting formats themselves? Okay. I'm going to keep moving then. Roles of the task force. So, really don't do well. Let me just move around here a little bit. Rules of the task force. Really, we're looking for you to help us with this by attending a meeting every 3 months. So that's kind of a commitment here. We want to make sure that you'll come to the majority, if not all, of the task force meetings, so about every 3 months, and we'll go over a schedule here in just a minute. We want your diverse perspectives. We want to make sure that we don't kind of become an echo chamber and only think of this from, say, a policy point of view or like a land use point of view. We want to think of it from all different angles. How can we strengthen the workforce housing opportunities here in San Marcos? We hope that you will also be able to engage your own constituencies, your own communities out there in this process. So you'll have your ear to the ground out there and be able to say, this is what I'm hearing people are concerned about, and bring that to the table here, and then also be able to spread the word. There will be opportunities for the public to engage in this effort, and so we want you to be able to spread the word out there in your communities as well. Also, we will be previewing material that will be made publicly available at these meetings, and we'd like your help to really understand what's the best way to say this, what are some lessons learned that you've had as you've talked about these topics before. So you're bringing kind of the lens that we need to be able to see these things through. And then also, we will be bringing the community input back to you as we get it throughout this process, and we want you to help us kind of, again, really think about how to integrate that into the outcome, the blueprint that Bert mentioned earlier. in addition to your stakeholder engagement responsibilities, you are also setting the goals. You're setting the critical success factors for this. We're going to be talking about what those goals are today. What do you want to see in this process? What do you want to see as the outcome? You're also providing data that you may have that can support this effort. So you are probably tracking information in your own organizations, your own communities. We want to see that data. We want to integrate it into the bank of knowledge that we'll build around this topic. We'll be analyzing issues and developing strategies and prioritizing strategies. You will be leading that in this task force. We will help to synthesize and prioritize policies and actions, reviewing the draft. When there is a draft, which will probably be about this time next year, we hope that you will be reviewing it and really making sure that it's as comprehensive as it can be. And then ultimately, you will be thumbs up. You will provide the thumbs up on that final draft, which will then be sent on to City Council for their review and approval as well. Any questions about the role of the task force? All right, well, we'll just keep moving. Okay, so timeline. I mentioned we have a task force about every 3 months, and each one of them will cover a piece of the topic. And we aren't going to think of it as a final plan, a handful of papers. And we won't be starting on page 1 and ending on the last page. We will be providing the highest level of the outline, and then each meeting will be the next level, the next level, the next level. So at this first meeting, we're going to talk about vision and goals. We're going to let Sean inspire us, Abby inspire us a little bit about how important this topic is. We're going to bake that enthusiasm and passion into the vision and goals. The next meeting, we're going to be brainstorming strategies. What are all the ways we could put together a program for workforce housing? At the third meeting, and that will be in December, early December, first half of December. Then we have the third task force meeting that will be in the spring. We'll be talking about actions. So once we have an identified list of strategies we'd like to employ, we're really going to come back to you and say, well, it would take these 5 steps to make that strategy happen. And here's all the partners we would need, and here's the difficulty of each of those actions, and we'll let you help us identify and put some real bookends around those actions. What do we want to tackle first? And then in June, next summer, we'll have a draft deliverable. For lack of a better term right now, we're calling it a housing blueprint, but you all get to help conceive of what that looks like, what it's called, what's included in it. And so, so for now, it's a placeholder. It's a working title of the housing blueprint. And then next fall, we'll be here with the final draft. We'll be looking for your support for that. We'll also be looking for you to identify ways of engaging your own community in the implementation of it. So be thinking about that as well. Part of the reason you're here is because you have resources and opportunities and things at your fingertips that you can bring to the topic of workforce housing. And then finally, we'll be wrapping up next fall and winter and going to council with that blueprint. At each point, there is a council committee. Sneak peek. There is a council committee, and after each task force meeting, the workforce council committee will also meet. They'll be digesting the information that you all received at the meeting and the comments and direction that were given at that meeting. We also anticipate sometime next summer, once there is a draft, that we would have a community input session to put it out there for the community to comment on as well. Okay? Any questions about the timeline? Yes, sir.
The draft, the work product is going to be written by Lionheart?
Yes, yeah. But it's actually going to be written by you all.
I understand,
yeah.
but it's physically to be written.
That's right.
And then the ultimate work product of this group is a housing blueprint recommendation. That's our product.
Yes, that's the working title for now. And we'll see where this goes. There might be other things that get documented in there that might be of value. Yes, ma'am.
Who's on the council committee?
Pardon?
Who's on the council committee?
Bert, or do you want to?
The council committee is council members, Mayor Tomides, council member Derek, and council member Pruitt.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the schedule or?
Yeah, I have a question in regards to the community input session. Are we only permitted to have one community input session? Or is there opportunity to work in the event that we may have to
Yes.
schedule more than one?
I mean, we're open to doing that. These are all publicly open meetings. We are taking public comment as we go, and we'll be feeding that to you all as well and making it available online. So it's not that that's the only public comment period, it's just that there will be something for the public to review at that point.
Right.
So, okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abby.
Hi. So Abby Gilfillan, planning manager, and I'm really excited to be here and really excited to get the opportunity to work on this issue in San Marcos and to work with this group too. So really excited to be here. One of the things I was in preparation for this meeting, as I was looking over and seeing what had other communities done, how had other communities sort of come together around the issue of housing. And one community on this corridor that's done that is City of San Antonio. They just recently wrapped up a housing task force that they had put together almost a year ago. And one of the things that they came out with that I thought was pretty striking is that they said that housing is and should be treated like infrastructure in their city, and that within their city government, they should think about housing in the same way that they think about infrastructure. And if you think about it, food, water, and shelter are sort of some of the basic ingredients of what we need as humans. So I thought that that was really interesting and remarkable thing to come out with as a group. One of the things that's different about housing as infrastructure, though, than water, electric, and wastewater, is that those things are built by the city, planned by the city, and put in the ground, underground, and it's all done by one group. Housing is not. And in fact, housing is not built by the city. Housing is built by the community, and so it's different in that way, and that's why this task force is so important, and why I'm excited to work on this project with you all. So, in terms of the timeline, Rebecca talked about that. Fall of 2019, we hope to have a really great recommendation and blueprint to bring forward to the City Council. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that have got us to this point. Our City Council has made workforce housing a strategic initiative. It's something that we are focusing on this year and probably into the future. I don't think it's one of those things that you can never check off and say that that's done. But three of the big outcomes that Council strategic initiative are increasing the rates of home ownership is one, assembling a workforce housing task force, which I think that can actually be broadened to really making sure to bring the community in on this project to build capacity, both in the community as well as within the city, to be able to really address this issue. And number three, one that a lot of the times sometimes we forget, is that one of the biggest assets we have in affordable housing is the housing that's out there now. So maintaining that existing housing stock and making sure that it's safe and that it maintains a certain quality of life for the people that live in there is really important because that is probably one of our biggest assets when we talk about the workforce housing and the housing that people are living in now. That is our biggest asset in terms of workforce housing. I'm going to go through each one of those outcomes really quickly and talk about some of the initiatives the city is already doing in those within each of those three outcomes. So in terms of home ownership, we have have in your packets is the current affordable workforce housing policy that's been adopted. And what that policy does, it was done in 2014, and what that policy really focused on, almost exclusively, really dove into, is the issue of development regulations. And how can we make sure that our development regulations are encouraging opportunities for homeownership, diverse housing, and different types of housing to come to be built in San Marcos that meet the needs of people at all income levels and at all desires, or what they meet those housing choice needs. So that's been something that we've worked on a lot. We did adopt a new development code, and that new development code really talked about a lot of these issues and addressed a lot of these things. One of our biggest tasks now moving forward is monitoring that and seeing, was it effective? Are we actually getting the products on the ground that are in line with that housing policy? A housing study. This is really exciting and really important and key. One of the things I think that's our job as staff in working with you all is making sure that you have the best information and best data as you're looking at these issues, so that when we talk about numbers like 70% owner occupancy, we're not just looking at that number on the surface, but we're able to get down and understand why that number is there, and you know what's going on that's creating that, and being able to break that down. Right now, a housing study would be very valuable to us in order to do that. Right now, we utilize American Community Surveys, the census data, which is pretty high level. And in a community of our size, once you start breaking that data, once you start trying to break down those big numbers into different income brackets and things like that, you start to really lose some of the validity in the data and things. So having somebody come in and being able to really look at our numbers here, where are the gaps? What are we missing? Who are we not able to serve? The other big thing that this housing study is going to do is it's going to do what's called a housing choice survey. So we're actually going to go out into the community and not just look at what housing is there now, but ask people what housing is not there now. What are we missing? And so that's a really big thing that's a really important step, because a lot of times when you do a market analysis, you just look at what's there now. But if it's not there now, there's not any way to really analyze it except for asking people. So that's going to be a big piece, and that's going to come to you all. It's something that we're hoping that you'll be able to look at, some of the initial stuff, initial numbers and data that comes out of that housing study at your next meeting in December. Housing programs. The city does have several housing programs. We do home buyer loans. We have the new money through disaster recovery money that's come in. We're actually building some homes as well and rehabbing homes. We have nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity who build homes here in San Marcos as well. So we do some of that, and those things we've gotten additional budget this year in order to expand all of those programs. So we're hoping to be able to do more this year. No. Workforce Housing Task Force, I've already talked about this. This is one of the big outcomes that we really do include the community. This is a community initiative, and that we build capacity within the community as well as within the city to adequately address this topic. These are the different perspectives. I would add to this neighborhood organizations and groups, and there's probably many more perspectives to add to this as well. And then in terms of the outcome number 3, maintaining existing housing stock in safe conditions. This one is a really important one. It's important from the perspective of, I talked about that being our biggest asset, and there's a real balance that we need to work on and to address in order to make sure that that housing is maintained in safe conditions and high quality of life for people without increasing the cost of that housing where it's no longer part of our affordable housing stock. So those are the types of things that we're going to be talking about here in this group. We also, one of the ways to address that is through housing rehabilitation programs, which we do this year. We're looking at being able to have funds. We have 22 homes whereas in past years, we haven't done quite as many. So we have great partners in the community that help with that as well. I'm going to talk a little bit and just hit you with some high-level numbers. Like I said, we're really looking forward to a housing study where we can dive into a lot of these numbers. But one of the things I think that we're seeing in the region is that when you look at, for example, so we are within the Austin Round Rock MSA, and that's where we're located. And so, like HUD utilizes those numbers from the Austin Round Rock MSA when they talk about the area median income. So the area median income right now for the Austin Round Rock MSA is $86,000 for a family of 4. We took our census numbers, and I think where the value in these numbers really are is in looking at the comparisons between where we are, Round Rock and Georgetown, similar sizes. So those numbers in the middle represent the number of households that are below that area median income. And one of the things that I've seen before is almost a bullseye map where you take the whole Austin Round Rock MSA area and you go from center of Austin and just move out, and you'll see those income levels go down as you move out from the center of Austin. So that's something that's going on in our region, and it's definitely something that we're seeing here in San Marcos. This went out in some of the packet and the framework that you guys have seen, that housing gap. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about with this group is not just this housing gap, but what we want to do is we really want to break that down and find out, this is the housing gap in terms of purchasing a home. But we want to look at what are the gaps across the board. What are the gaps that are out there for different demographic groups? What are the gaps that are out there within our housing supply and our housing stock? So that's gaps is something that we'll talk about a lot. And then this is another chart that again sort of tries to break down and look at those housing gaps in a different way. So what this does is it sort of breaks down into income brackets where the population, so what's the percentage of the population that makes a certain amount and how many homes are available for that population. So looking at this, 60% or so of the population makes less than 43,000, but there are less than 10% of the homes that are sold in that category. So we have a big population of people with trying to purchase homes in a very small percentage of homes or condos or anything else that's available in the market to purchase. And then when you get up into the, you can see sort of how that disparity is there. So those are the things that we're going to want to break down even further and look at more closely. The other thing, the other strategic initiative the City Council has this year is community partnerships. That's the second strategic initiative. One of the first things that that group, that strategic partnership group, which involves the school district and the county, worked on is talking about this issue of workforce housing. And one of the first things that we talked about in terms of a goal that community partnership can start working on is looking at how do we transition vacant, blighted, or tax forfeiture properties into permanently affordable homes. So this is sort of this comes from that process and those discussions where essentially one of the things would be that we would look at partnering with the school district and the county on identifying those tax forfeiture properties or blighted properties, purchasing those properties, and being able to transition them over to nonprofit builders or other other home builders that could participate in a program to be able to put homes and get those properties back onto the tax rolls with homes that are affordable. And the other thing that's been very important to the City Council initiative when we're talking about homes is that we ensure that those homes remain affordable. So permanently affordable homes is something that we're going to be talking about with the group because it's really important that you don't want to see that one-time affordability where you build a home, it's affordable for one family, and then even if there's a period of affordability 10 years down the line, it's not affordable anymore. So what permanent affordability means is that there's deed restrictions, or other mechanisms put on that property so that it remains affordable when it's sold to the next buyer down the line. So those are some of the things that we are already, the city is already working on putting in place. And this is my last slide. Just community partnerships really are the key to confronting the housing challenges that we're facing now and that we will continue to face as a very rapidly growing city within this corridor. So just excited to be here, and I think Sean is going to get up and talk next. Rebecca's going to introduce him. There we go. So, Sean's bio is in your packet. It's also up on the screen, and in that you'll see he's a certified planner, an economic developer, a land strategist. He's got a lot of accolades behind him. But I've been working with Sean for about 12 years now on various projects, and I know some secrets about Sean that aren't in the standard bio, and so I wanted to tell y'all a little bit about that. First of all, I know Sean to be a very stubborn person. He doesn't believe that economic and growth and economic development has to equal gentrification and pushing the workforce out of a community. He believes that those things can coexist together. And I've watched him be very stubborn about that and find ways to make that work. He also believes that good quality and affordable housing is essential to creating great neighborhoods, and it's essential to creating successful communities. So they all need to work hand in hand. And dirty secret number 2 is he's also not just a believer in that. I think of him as almost a zealot. And he proves that because he not only works in this world where he's constantly trying to make better communities, both from an affordable and workforce housing standpoint, but also from economic development standpoint, but he's also putting in his free time. He's very active in the Chestnut Neighborhood Revitalization Group in East Austin, helping preserve the affordability in East Austin as well. So with that, I'd like to turn over the mic to Sean, the very stubborn zealot.
All right, thank you very much. Just make sure I got this the other way. So when she said that, I immediately started going through the Rolodex of like bad things that I've done in the past. Thank God she doesn't know those. This was probably the fastest that it ever took me to get from downtown Austin to downtown San Marcos. I don't think I went less than 65 miles per hour. Can you believe that? Unbelievable. So I've worked with San Marcos before in working on the downtown master plan. My company Pegasus is an urban planning and economic development firm. We work all over the country. But like Rebecca, we tend to be working a lot in Texas right now. You know, so many of our nation's best economies are in Texas, and so we're all kind of working across the state of Texas. But I wanted to just give you a quick perspective of what I do, not to toot my own horn, but to give you an idea of where I'm coming from in my background. So, you know, we wrote actually Keeping Austin Creative study, which was really focused on Austin touts its economy as having a creative class and #1 city in the country for musicians, but it's becoming less and less important. So we examined that aspect of the economy. Worked on the downtown master plan here. We do work up and down the corridor. So we do a lot of work on the public side of things. So we do market analyses, feasibility studies. We also do work for private sectors, developers, where we're trying to examine the market, do housing market studies, et cetera. And then about 15 years ago, when I moved to East Austin, I got a divorce, and East Austin was really the only place you could buy a piece of property. And I was one of those lucky ones to buy a quarter acre for $30,000. And the person who sold me that lot actually sold me one of the commercial lots that our nonprofit is actually building on right now, and I know how much they paid for that. She wanted to offer me all of it. If I had the wherewithal to do that, it would have been a good investment. So I'm also the president of a nonprofit affordable housing organization. And then lastly, I do some private development. And so I wear each of those hats, and I have kind of a good understanding of the housing and commercial market areas. So this development up here is one of the developments that our nonprofit has built in East Austin. We've done a bunch of single-family affordable houses. This is a 22-unit senior affordable housing project. HUD Section 202 sponsored project, highly successful project, huge waiting list. I imagine you guys have a huge waiting list for senior affordable housing. But so what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of frame the issues the way I see it. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I'm giving you perhaps a different perspective on how I kind of look at things. Really challenge you to think about affordability as not just the cost of housing, but also where it is in relation to transit, good mobility. What are people paying for daycare, for food? Those are all really, really important aspects of all this. And then I'm going to talk about a couple of different projects that I've worked on to give you kind of that perspective. Two things I'm going to say right off the bat right here before I get into it on policy and then on capacity. One of the things that the City of Austin did for our nonprofit and all the other CHODOs, Community Housing Development Organizations, CHODOs, CHDO, is they provided capacity building assistance to the tune of about $25,000 a year for about 10 years. I know Bert was actually involved in that and would sign our contracts. And so that was really helpful for all the nonprofits to kind of get to a point where we had some capacity to write grants for affordable housing or that sort of thing. So that's one of the things that was really helpful. And then just on the policy part, before I delve in a little bit more, I wanted to not challenge you. It was just a really interesting moment when I was reading through your literature and your material on wanting to promote more ownership versus rental. I totally understand where that's coming from, but you need to understand that it is very, very difficult to get applicants that make less than 80% of their median family income to qualify for a home mortgage. Because you already have a very, very low percentage of your folks that can qualify. And then of that pool, typically, especially people making less than 60% of MFI, they have problems with their credit scores. They might not have kept jobs. And so, it's a real challenging part. You just need to know that when you're kind of getting into the home ownership part of it, that is a real challenge. So let me kind of move ahead. Just a couple things. There is an alternative to greenfield development. I was happy to hear Abigail. Is it Abby or Abigail? Abby. Talk about this, but typically when we're thinking about new housing, we're thinking about this kind of greenfield development. I challenge you to really think about the areas within the city that you already have for infill development, and maybe that has a higher zoning that can do more. It's better for everybody. It's better on the infrastructure. It's better for individuals wanting to kind of live closer. And even with greenfield developments, there are alternatives to that kind of thing. The other thing to keep in mind is we live in Central Texas. Most of us live in a food desert or are food insecure. There's other more PC terms that I think that are being used for that right now. But think about that. When you're trying to promote affordable housing, think about their location, that potential location to a grocery store, farmer's market, etc. And then the other aspect is Texas has an incredibly high rate of loss of farmland and loss of ranch land. So again, think about when you're trying to promote housing, areas within the city, not necessarily greenfield development. And the last thing I just want to point out here is that when we look at kind of the pie of our costs, the monthly costs, so housing shouldn't be more than about 30%, right? Food is about 20%, transportation is 18%. So almost 20% of your cost is devoted to housing. I know you, San Marcos, like a lot of cities up and down the corridor, you probably have, 70% of your labor force or more works outside of the city. Might be a little bit less than that. I know in Buda, it's like 85% of their labor force works outside of the city. So there's, by attracting and retaining more companies here, I think you can kind of address that. But do keep in mind, where you're trying to promote housing, or if you're going to have a matrix of scoring potential projects, the proximity to a mobility hub, the proximity to a bus station, the proximity to a Lone Star rail station, because that's still happening, right? So talked about these a little bit already. It's very interesting, again, when you look at the rental versus the home ownership costs. In Austin, there was not a lot in the pipeline for new rental housing. And so because of that, the rental price on the housing went up really fast. And so you're starting to see that kind of level out a bit. So this is the gap. The top line is the price of median rent. This is the price of home ownership. So home ownership has also gone up considerably, but you're going to start seeing the rental price dip down just a little bit. So I'm not going to talk that much about this one project. I'm only going to say, because I'm developing it, but agrarian types of developments. It's an interesting concept. There are none in Texas, but there's hundreds of them across the United States, where you basically take a golf course, and instead of a golf course, you have a working farm. Beauty about that for residents is they get 5 to 10 pounds of fresh organic produce per week. And that's exactly what we're doing in Elgin. You can learn more about it on our website if you want. I won't talk that much more about it. But this is what it is. It's on 24 acres. We have 100 units. One of the things that I know you guys have been open to before, Elgin gave us a PUD, so a planned unit development. It allowed us, these lots are actually smaller than 3,500 square feet. Shocker, right? Really small units. But people love the size. They range from 650 square feet to about 1,400 square feet. And I won't talk anymore about that project. So the last one I wanted to talk about is a project called the Chicon in East Austin. I came down here once before. Some of you might have heard me talk about it. But this is actually something we've been working on. When I said Bert signed some contracts with us, it's been quite a while. We've been working on this for probably 8 years. And so it's finally built. 2 of the buildings are built. We have residents moving in there. But it's a mixed-use, mixed-income project. And we started off wanting to do rental, but the neighborhood really pushed us. We needed a zoning variance, and so the neighborhood knew they had us, and they said, we'll support that if you do ownership. So we did, and it's been really, really challenging getting to the home ownership. And so I just wanted you to kind of be in tune to that. So this one, it's ultimately we're going to have, our nonprofit's been around for a while. That's kind of what that says. So there's going to be a total of 43 units with 27 1-bedroom, 1-baths, 12 2-bedroom, 2-baths, 4 3-bedroom, 2-baths, and 33 of all those 43 units are going to be affordable to people making less than 80% of median family income. One of the things that Abby said that is really important is that we do have a land trust in place for this project. So through what's called a shared equity model, every single unit, if Bert goes to buy one of these affordable units, he can still increase his equity on that unit. It works out to be about $2,500 a year in equity that you can make on that. So after 10 years, you come away with $25,000 in equity. It's not going to be the same amount of equity increase as if you buy a market rate unit, but for somebody that's never bought an affordable house, that's good equity built into it. But it also ensures that unit is going to be affordable for the next person to buy it. That's that shared equity model with the land trust. Highly, highly recommend you put that in place. Otherwise, people will just flip it, and we've all seen that happen. So these are, it's interesting, for our households, because of the 1-bedroom, 1-baths, many of them are single buyers. There's a couple of dinks, double income, no kid buyers. But these are older numbers. But so for a single person household, less than 80% of MFI is about $44,000 a year, $45,000 a year. You guys have the same, even though we live in Austin, because of the NSA, you guys use the exact same numbers, which is actually an issue, and I'm not going to get into that, but it's an issue in terms of how much money you actually get from the feds to support housing here. Anyway, so most of our buyers have been making less than $45,000 a year or less. And when you go to qualify them, like I said earlier, it's been really challenging because a lot of those folks that are making that amount of money, they haven't really built up a big credit score and that sort of thing. So it is slightly challenging. So this is in East Austin. If you ever go into East Austin, if you know where 12th and Chicon is. 12th and Chicon used to be the heart and soul of the African American community. And then it just kind of went into disrepair. And when I bought my property from this woman right there for $30,000, she also offered me this one and this property. She was going to give that to me for $120,000. And our nonprofit paid $600,000 for it like about 6 years ago. But this area was really a rough area. There was a lot of prostitution, a lot of drug sales. And so we said, if we're going to have the biggest impact, it's got to be right here. And so people have been really happy with what we've done. It's brought about a big resurgence in the neighborhood. One of the other things to think about, I know how this is a little bit beyond your scope, but because of the subsidy that we've gotten through the city, we've decided to also sell the commercial units at about $20 per square foot less than what the small businesses are buying in that area. It's been awesome because now for the first time you're seeing small business owners that can afford ownership of the building and a space versus having to rent, because the commercial rent price is really going up pretty high in Austin. So the last thing I wanted to just say on this one is, so these two buildings, we built this one, we built this one. This third lot we have not yet built. And we're going to the city right now and having some discussions with them about, that's kind of how they're looking right now, about the third building being, I'll come back to this, the third building being allowing us to do a micro unit owner-occupied project. And so what we could have done on this property is the same type of thing as we were doing on this other one. 15 residential units, some 3 bedrooms, some 2 bedrooms, some 1 bedrooms, totaling about 13,000 square feet in residential space. But if you allow us to do 26 micro units at 500 square foot each, that's about the same amount. And so we're saying, allow us to do this, we'll double the amount of affordable units, we know the market is there, and allow us to design this, I don't think you guys are ready for this here in San Marcos, carless. So no on-site required parking. And in return, we're gonna have a fleet of electric vehicles, 3 or 4 of them, that only those residents can use for their, going grocery shopping or whatnot. They're interested in it, and so they're exploring that. There are several projects in the CBD area that do not have any cars. One hotel, there's another project on Congress and 8th Street that's being proposed. Another one by Community Foundations, which is more of a homeless development, but also no cars. So I just want you to keep this in mind. This is, as you think about housing and housing policy, you also have to think about the trends in housing. Some silly ones, and Rebecca probably has this data better than I do, but I have a 22-year-old daughter. It took so much challenge to take her to get her driver's license. She didn't want to get it. It used to be driver's licenses. I think the average person bought their license before they were like 18 years old. It's like 60% of 18-year-olds, like in the 60s, had a driver's license. That percent has gone down so much because of our mobility options. Kids don't want to be strangled with that cost of an automobile. And all of our multimodal options have increased so much. In Austin, I know San Marcos is the same way. 12th and Chicon is a mobility hub. So we're working with, Austin's working with the Rocky Mountain Institute. Abby, I don't know if you've worked with those guys before. Super knowledgeable, and they're giving Austin all sorts of different multimodal options. The last thing I'll say is, and I don't know how I've done on time, probably doing fine, is you guys also have other land assets. And so one of the things I know you guys are talking about right now is this innovation district. Some of you have probably heard about this term, innovation district. And I know you have maybe a committee that's looking at that right now. We're actually working on Oklahoma City Innovation District. We did one in Amarillo. And you have, the city owns a lot of assets in and around this area. So when you think about affordable housing, you should immediately be thinking about what your publicly owned assets are that can be leveraged for affordable housing. So that's kind of all that I had to say. I'm sure there might be some questions about some of what I've brought up. Any questions? Challenge me on anything?
What kind of amenities does this community on Chicon have in place besides the electric vehicles for the residents?
I'm glad you mentioned that because I mentioned bring it up. She asked, what kind of amenities does the Chicon have? So it's pretty basic. We have 2 common areas that are the same size as a 1 bedroom, 1 bath. And one is air conditioned on the 2nd floor and designed for like co-work space. And then the third one on the 3rd floor is open to the elements, so there's no doors, but there's seating and stuff like that over there. And then on the third property that we're planning on building, so what we've been talking to the city about is to actually have, because the city of Austin contracted with somebody to do a study on the increasing cost of workspace for artists and performing artists, and it's really gone through the roof on those costs. So one of the things we're talking about in the city is to actually have a common space that's devoted for artists and musician workshop space, shared space, like maybe 1,000 square feet or something like that. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you for this presentation on information that's always done now. So one of the conversations that we hear a lot in San Marcos about going into infill and going higher density because it would create workforce housing or affordable housing. A lot of the responses from citizens are, well, how do we know they're actually going to, for the savings of the land, actually make these products more affordable and not just bank more money in the developer? So what do you as a developer do to show those numbers to the public to say, yes, we actually are delivering, because the density that we can allow, we are delivering more affordable housing. This is the change in the numbers because of that.
Yeah. You know, one of my criticisms of Austin is that they haven't done a very good job with tracking that, because they've made a lot of deals with different developers. And I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I do know they haven't done a great job of tracking it. The other thing is that, for the city to do a development deal that allow maybe a density bonus or whatnot, there ultimately would need to be some level of deed restrictions or whatever, how the city wants to implement that to ensure that that occurs. That's typically what I see. Yes, sir.
Yes. Early on when you were talking about the Chacon project, you said that when you converted or you decided to switch it to a condominium, is that correct? That you encountered a lot of challenges in getting them sold. Could you elaborate a little bit on what those challenges were?
Sure.
Is it beyond just qualifying for them? Or?
Yeah, it is. It's really kind of twofold. One is the development financing side of it, and then the other one is how buyers, homeowners finance their mortgage. So on a for sale condominium development, mixed use development, versus a rental where it's residential units and commercial on the ground floor, banks are look much more closely, if you will, at the ownership side versus the rental side, and so we needed to have a certain percentage that was going to be pre-sold. We had never done a for sale ownership product before, and so the city needed to kind of step in and serve slightly as a guarantor with some of that as far as the bank goes. So there's a lot more hurdles for us to go through on the construction development financing side. On the ownership side of things, it is just more challenging to find a larger pool of buyers for the ownership units versus the rental units. Because for the rental units, the bar for gauging your ability to pay off for rent, et cetera, is much less than it is for buying a home. And so it really narrowed our pool of buyers. Yes.
I just wanted to speak to Lisa's point about visibility on trade-offs that you may have with public land or density that may or may not be taken advantage of by for-profit development. But in Texas, it is a supply-rich environment. There is essentially a cost-plus pricing methodology, and the developer or an investor has a hurdle rate. Maybe that hurdle rate is 17 or 20 or 22%. What you're suggesting is they would make 40% instead of and I think if you were in a collaborative environment, you could very easily have visibility on that. And that would be my...
Yeah, and it wasn't that I'm suggesting it was...
I just think...
It has been a conversation. How do we know that once you go denser, that's really what we're creating? We're not just...
I think you have to have visibility in the pro forma. And if you increase the cost $1 million, then the pro forma just trickles up. And it all goes, organic either way.
I'll tell you, this has actually been my big gripe in Austin too. I think I already said there was one. I got a few with Austin, but you know, not only do they have their subjectivity in the development review process is extreme, so you never know what you're going to get in terms of, you know, a permitter and what they're going to do. But Austin Energy, I mean, some of their decisions cost us close to $500,000. This is for a nonprofit developer. And so one of the things that's nice about that transparency, which you have to, it's a double-edged sword, is if the city is a partner on that somehow, whether or not that's through density or whatnot, one of those line items is also going to be, you know, the cost of permitting, et cetera. And so I don't know that too many cities do this where they actually hold the city to that cost, but just know that that is, in a lot of cities, that's a big variable that you just can't really control. You know, like in Elgin, for example, there's some off-site utilities that we need to do. So there's about $500,000 of off-site utilities we're going to have to bring. And so the city, I like their approach. They don't give money out. They're all about performance bonuses. And so they've said, since you have some commercial part of it, when those jobs are created, we'll reimburse X% back through a 380 agreement. But somebody else have a hand up? Yes, ma'am.
Could you shed some light on just like divergence in narratives around the one calls revitalization, but a majority of conversations from Austin go towards gentrification?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. I mean, I'm an adjunct faculty at UT in planning, and I'm a certified planner, and I can't stand the word gentrification because it just polarizes immediately is all, right? And you know, the definition of gentrification and the explanation for gentrification, it's a legitimate definition. You know, I mean, it's when, you know, new investment comes into an area and it prices out the existing residents, and that definitely happens. I think what Austin didn't do a very good job of was, as Abby was talking about earlier, preserving some of your housing stock and your affordability that you have already. There's things you can do, you know, through neighborhood stabilization grants and other ways to do that, that I wish Austin would have done a better job of. But, you know, East Austin, 78702, is the third fastest gentrifying neighborhood in the United States, outside of the Bronx and one of the zip codes in New Orleans. And it's sad, but that's exactly what's going on.
So I guess I wanted to get back to your farm concept. You said those units were in smaller lots, 650 square feet. What are those selling for?
Yeah. So the smallest unit is selling for about $130,000, and then the largest one is going for about $300,000.
And I guess to go back to that, I think that we really do have to remain open to those new concepts, including the electrical car concept, because affordable workforce housing is a multi-complex issue. And it has to be faced not only with home ownership, but with the rental market, because we do have 70% of people that are renting here. But, you know, answering the questions of how they're going to maintain their affordability is a big issue. And we don't want to create affordable housing stock and then it's gone in 2 years or 5 years. And the same in the rental market. But, you know, you said something really interesting when you said they had us here on the, what was it you were trying to get?
Try to get zoning variance.
Exactly. And where the city doesn't own housing, that's the way to make it happen, in my opinion. Is that we have a lot of new complexes coming into San Marcos where those housing ordinances can be used to complement the workforce housing aspect of it. Like the units that are being built by IHOP. I don't know how many units those are, but there are hundreds of units. A certain percentage of those should have been made either senior housing or affordable workforce housing. And the developer should have been given some kind of incentive. But this is where, you know, I think the future of workforce housing is at. Not just single family.
Yeah.
I would just say that if we're having land issues and redevelopment issues and stuff, that everybody has a stake in it. There's some pieces of land that need to be redeveloped that maybe the college owns, that the power company honestly needs to be considered for that as well. Just because they have a workforce housing issue for their professors, and there are incentives in place for them to have to live here in the community. Maybe we do have that as well in the city. More of those types of things engaged, but also if there's something that's not being developed and not being utilized efficiently, then somehow that can kind of make this happen moving forward. Let's look at all the things that are out there, not just one. And I also would like to see a broader approach to the ownership or the home ownership rate that they're talking about. Trying to move that number, like you said, I see it as a challenge too, because it's geared towards just moving a number, and outcomes matter. A lot of the times we have a very transient workforce as it is, with college students, the retail, and Amazon, the types of positions that we have, even the people from Gary Job Corps that were brought up with the pipe company, because they're just coming out of school, first job, they move and transition out. And I would rather not see the houses flip. I want to make sure that we have communities and long-term residents that have buy into these communities. So maybe a certain amount of time that they've lived in the area, and that would make them available for some sort of housing that's made affordable to them. Some rethinking it from a whole broad approach, but also local ownership should be part of that, because then if you have people that own some of that workforce housing as rental properties and stuff, they have an incentive to be there and make sure that it's attended to. For the guy that has one or two houses, that might be a carpenter or something that has a mother's house in his house, or his kids or his children, and he's responsible for all that. Let's have those people here. Let's incentivize them to have ownership versus another hedge fund that comes in and buys a whole neighborhood out. And it's affordable, but it's all rental, but it's never going to reach the stock. It's never going to come into the equation, but it provides a really good, affordable housing for these people. So, there's just a lot of ways to look at it. I just don't want to get focused too much on moving that number. It's got to be done in a meaningful way. And I think if we do that and we kind of broaden it out a little bit, we'll get a better result versus being too specific about we have to have bodies in their ownership.
You said a lot of really good things there. I'm just going to tease out one of the things that when you talked about how there's a lot of institutions that have assets, land assets, et cetera. I know in something that's been talked about in Austin, but they've never done anything about it, is if you look at vehicle maintenance facilities, AISD, ACC, Travis County, City of Austin, Fire Department, Police Department, millions and millions, and they all like to have them in their own precincts. And if you were to look at combining some of those assets and then freeing up some of that land for development, public-private partnership development, there's a lot of those kind of opportunities. I don't know how much the city's already done and investigating out and all that, probably a fair amount. But, yeah.
Let's take a couple more questions and then we'll move on. Yep.
You had mentioned that one of the hurdles that you guys encountered with the development in Austin was coming in contact, especially with first-time home buyers, credit issues, lack of knowledge, etc. Did the city do anything, implement any programs or implement anything to kind of educate? Because I'm a realtor and I find the same hurdles as well. But here I left to turn the people that don't qualify for housing over to some of the brokers that I have created relationships with, that I know that they will take the people and hold their hands for a period of time. Outside of that, there's no programs that I'm aware of here. Did they implement or think about implementing any programs that would assist people?
I think the city has played with that in the past, where they do their own training in-house, but they typically contract with a nonprofit or two that does that. And there are several in Austin that do that. And it was a requirement that any buyer of one of the what we call restricted units, the affordable units, went through a home buyer education process. I think the city required that actually, and so it was up to us in terms of whether or not we wanted to contract with a nonprofit. There's even online if somebody wanted to do that, which isn't that great. But that's a couple of examples of that. I think it's, no offense to anybody in the room, but most realtors are kind of lazy. And so the hard case projects like that, most realtors are just going to say, nope. Because it's challenging to get people that are just real close to qualifying to just work through a couple of things and get them qualified.
What's the last word, anybody?
Rebecca, could I just add, not a question, but just to add to that piece, one of the programs that you might want to look at, and we'll make sure we can get you the specific contact information that I served on the board of directors and was involved in for 10 years in Waco, was at the time, it was called Neighborhood Housing Services, and now it's called NeighborWorks. And so they essentially work with, specifically with first-time home buyers. So they take folks in, they clean up their credit, they work with them on savings accounts, they get them ready, and so they create a pipeline, and then they actually have a process where they have properties that the city has partnered with them on. They have blueprints for homes, and then they have a construction arm, so they actually then build the homes. So that's a program that, quite honestly, the community had embraced, realtors, the whole community, neighborhoods, there was a meeting that was a stable program that focused on home ownership for the people that needed and wanted home ownership and could qualify, and specifically was first-time homebuyers.
All right.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. All right. So now that we're talking, which I'm really glad to see everybody talking, and I'm going to make sure everyone's talked at least once before we close the door today. But I would like to switch gears to the vision and goal exercises, and they're actually in your packet in a couple different places. There's a oops. This clicker all days. It's in your packet in the slides, but then there's also a Word document in the back that has the exact same goals in it if you want to see them up close and personal. But they're up here on the screen. Now, I want to explain a little bit about where they came from. I wanted to make it easy on y'all to get started because this is our first meeting together, and so I didn't want to just put a blank sheet up. What I did was sift through the mountains of information that Abby had given me when we first started working on this project a few weeks ago, and looked through it for goals, vision-y kind of statements and things, and I've put them up here as a starting point. I have no ownership over them. If you tell me they're rotten and in the wrong direction, I'll throw them all out the door and start again today. But in some of the documentation, the presentations, the things that led to this point in time, these were some of the goals expressed, okay? So the vision, as Bert mentioned, is to develop an action-oriented housing blueprint to address workforce housing challenges in San Marcos. So that's kind of been the objective of this workforce housing task force as it's been conceived of. We can work on massaging that vision statement for sure, and I want your input on that, but I'll just go over all of them today. There were 4 goals that kept coming up, and we've just kind of, made them concise, but increase rates of home ownership, maintain existing housing stock in safe conditions, so the quality of the existing housing stock and stabilization of those neighborhoods, develop capacity to jointly confront housing challenges, and this was a whole bunch of statements about internal to the city, the capacity for workforce housing implementation, the capacity in the community, the partnerships that the city has, and also resources, funding, and that kind of thing. There were a lot that rolled up into this overarching goal statement. And then ensure new housing meets the needs of current and future residents. So making sure that we're thinking about the people that are here today and the growth that we anticipate happening, and whatever comes out of this has some sustainability into the future and relevance into the future. Those are broad goals. I want to hear from you what some of your goals are. What brought you here today? Why did you take your lunch hour and some change and decide to sit here and listen to us and be part of this task force? So I'm just kind of going to go around the room and just say, what brought you here today? What do you hope to achieve with this task force?
I think it's joint 2 things. One is, I am the new director of the Job Corps Center here in San Marcos, And, you know, having places for our staff that want to relocate to come in and be able to have a nice home and want to stay in San Marcos. So that's an important piece. And then also to be able to use our students in a way to help with the development for their educational purposes to gain experience. So those are my two issues.
Okay. So recruit and retain housing, and how would I phrase that other?
Just,
oh, sorry.
I would, opportunities for student internships. Who are the contractors that will be building the housing?
Okay. All right. I'll skip you and
Yeah, I came to just gain a better understanding of where we actually are with home ownership here in San Marcos. And then also to better understand how some of the large employers like Amazon might be able to help with resources.
okay. I like the sounds of that, right? Who likes that? All right.
I came because I'm interested in housing, home building, period. I think those are great goals. I think 3 is a little vague, and just if you just read it, you wouldn't know exactly what you're referring to. But I think those are great goals.
How could we make number 3 better?
Well, when you say jointly, it doesn't mean like it's just to a reader jointly with other cities, with the federal government. It doesn't mean anything. Jointly, internally, you explained it. But.
Okay, so I'm just going to write expand a little bit, number 3.
Sure.
We'll come back to that one.
A couple things. I was really interested in the collaboration and really trying to make San Marcos a more inclusive place. So we're really focusing on that sense of community. And I was interested in amenities because I think there's a reason that so many people want to live in places like Kissing Tree, that there's that sense of belonging, that place of belonging, that sense of community. There's those amenities in place, whether, you know, and I think it's going to be different for each group of the population we're looking at. Also, I think having a clear process in place for those, you know, who do have, you know, credit score issues, whether it's a partnership with a bank or a clear process to how they take the journey to becoming a homeowner, because it can be very confusing even if you do have all the resources in place.
Okay, process/resources for becoming a homeowner. Okay, great.
So I'm glad to be here because I think that in the mid-1990s, I think I attended a very similar meeting that was put together to try to address affordable housing. And it doesn't seem that we've made very much progress since then. So I'm hoping that this will help to ensure that we have affordable housing coming up. I'm also here because of the Innovation District that has been laid out here. As I saw the plans for it, it included one of the oldest neighborhoods in San Marcos. It's a small little neighborhood, but I am concerned about the community coming in and trying to create innovation sites that include existing housing that needs to remain in our community. So I think we need to work towards sustaining the subdivisions that we have that have been here for a very long time. And yes, they're old, but they are still homes to a lot of people. And I also am interested in trying to see how our community can begin to address better new choices for seniors or people who are retiring, not necessarily into a subdivision, but into an area where they're not having to, they're provided amenities, but they don't have to mow the lawn and that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right.
I'm here on behalf of Habitat. I think it was interesting what Sean was talking about earlier, just the life cycle of someone, whether they're starting out or they're in the middle of their career or family planning and then going off, obviously, as you get older. For me personally, I rented my home before I bought it about 10 years ago. I have a 3-year-old, and I always wonder, I don't think at this time, 10 years ago, would I be able to afford the house I'm in now? And in 30 or 40 years from now, will he be able to afford for himself or his family in this booming area? So some things that also in terms of the aging in place situation, seniors, things like that, not only does Habitat build new homes, but also we have programs similar to what colleagues on the other side of the room do, and like in counties like Bastrop and Caldwell County, and obviously Travis County, where we do help repair homes. So it's not just a housing issue in terms of a lot of people think of new construction, but also that stock in terms of being sustainable and building for older generations to come.
I'm here just generally because I would like to improve San Marcos. And I think, as Gloria said, number 2, and maintaining the existing housing stock, and maybe you could insert neighborhood in there in place of stock almost, is an important issue in San Marcos, because there are a lot of neighborhoods that need a little work.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to see San Marcos just be kind of this core that's surrounded by a lot of wealthy suburbs. And what you have in the center is just the old neighborhoods and a lot of students.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So number 2, did you have any recommended changes to that one?
No, other than I just said maintain existing neighborhood rather than just the housing stock.
Gotcha.
A little more broad, a little less specific on that,
Gotcha.
on specific houses.
All right. What brought you here today?
I was volunteering.
You were volunteering.
But I know that's probably never really correct. No, I came here because I teach construction science, and we understand square foot costs, what it costs to build a home. And I also worked for Habitat in the past. And if we're going to build a standard Habitat home, which was 1,029 square feet, is the one we were building, the cost isn't going to come down. It's about $150,000 of retails. We were building for $60,000, but we got the land donated. McCoy's always donating $5,000. We put sweat equity in, so the owner, so we can get them down to $60,000. But again, we were putting up 1.5 homes a year. I don't know if that's increased much in San Marcos, but and we would volunteer just on Saturdays. That's one part. The other thing is to maintain the existing stock. But what I'm really concerned is I really came here to find out what the parameters are. Is the city willing to waive the sewer and water tap fees? And that was $700 each when I was doing it. It's more now. And then what about the parameters? So what's the city willing to concede or help us with? Do we need to put those 2, 3-inch diameter trees in front of the house with 4 shrubs? What do you need to have the landscaping in? Can we get by with smaller lots? I like that planned urban development. We could come up with 100 acres and make our own rules based on what the city would allow us to do instead of having to meet the city requirements. So again, I could build a home. I mean, we understand what the price to build a home is, and it's not going to be cheaper unless, what I heard is there's no subsidies, right? Because we want to have affordable housing, but we don't have subsidized housing. So again, I think Habitat's definitely the way to go. They could build them really cheap. I think redoing some of the existing stock is a way of doing it. Having our own planned urban development. But again, there's going to have to be some political fortitude behind this if we're going to really see this done. I mean, I really think we ought to do it. But I hope it's more than just a feel-good thing. I hope we can really take concrete steps.
So let me clarify the subsidized piece. When I was talking about the spectrum, that it's in that middle. Subsidy, as I refer to, is where we as a city are having to subsidize and pay that portion of the mortgage or the payment. I wasn't talking about subsidies as in what you were just referring to.
Sewer and water tap, you would consider that to be a subsidy?
We're not in the subsidy business. What we're simply focusing in on is there's going to be a certain median family income level that our folks they're going to need a heavy subsidy to be able to get into a home. We don't have that capacity. What I'm talking about is that missing middle, that workforce, a couple of teachers with a couple of kids living, working in the school district, folks that are making 140% that we're talking about, our definition making no more than $120,000. So when they get in the house, they would be able to afford their mortgage payment and so forth, not subsidized as in us having to pay the mortgage payment. That's what I was referring to.
Okay, I wasn't really looking at subsidizing the mortgage. I was looking at if you waive this city, this sewer and water tab.
I think that should be on the table. Like
Okay, that's the kind of parameters. If I know what parameters we're working in, I come up with a solution. But if I don't, and again, we got Bill Holder over here, who's probably built tens of thousands of homes for Trend Marker homes. So he understands costs really well. And then behind me, I've got another professor who's worked in military housing and things like that. So I think if we can figure out what the parameters are that we're working within, then we can come up with some real solutions. But right now, I don't have those parameters. 100%.
Let's explore those over the next several meetings. And the next 2 meetings are going to be about strategies and actions. And so I think we'll be able to see, is the sky the limit in that regard? Or do we want to offer that up? And where does it stack up in priorities will come out of this process?
That's a good summary.
Well, my main reason is, and what I'm really glad to hear that Gloria and the gentleman brought up, is, my main reason for being here is because I want to make sure to protect and continue the strengthening of what I consider our legacy neighborhoods, which, we've got several that are on the brink of, gentrification, and my biggest fear is, we've got like the Innovative District coming in, we've got the Cultural Arts District in the pipeline that is looking to, go into all of these neighborhoods. And, my biggest thing is, we hear about workforce and affordable housing, but, as he just said right now, he's done studies, the house is gonna cost $160,000 to build. Unless we can come up with some kind of, staff to help us, and as well as all of us do our part of it. We're all here as volunteers, but I think if we all take a little bit of time to look into other outside resources that we can partner with to help with these subsidies that and cost-related issues, so that we can make sure that a single mother that has 3 kids that's working a full-time and a part-time job just to pay rent, you still got utilities, you still got food, you still got clothing, you still got school expenses for these kids. That's my main concern is, when you talk about workforce and affordable, housing, who specifically are, what demographic groups are we taking into consideration? All the demographic groups, or are we just looking at for what I consider like professional? Is, yes, I would love to see some professors. There's professors at the university that live out of town because they can't afford to buy the $300,000, $400,000 homes here. At the same time, we've got a lot of workforce people that work at Amazon, that work for Walmart, that work for the HEB, that work for a lot of the local businesses, that work at the university in an administrative or, in domestic. And that's what my main purpose for being here is that to make sure that these people are thought of. Like I said, the workforce and affordable, that's a term that is very broad. And I just want to make sure that the right people in San Marcos, in my community, are, being considered, are included in that.
Okay. It makes me think maybe number 4, we say the current and future residents and workforce. Because not all your workforce is current residents because they can't live here.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Ma'am?
To be completely honest, I'm here because of my story. I'm here because I was once homeless as a child. I'm here because I was in the government housing. I'm here because each and everything that Sean talked about, whether it be credit issues, all apply to me. And I feel like since I've experienced a lot of that, I could be a value and asset because of the background. But also, too, I want to make sure that the African American community is not forgotten about throughout this whole process as well. because we only represent roughly about 3% of the population here in San Marcos. Sometimes I feel like in endeavors that I encounter that we're forgotten about completely. So I want to make sure that our voices are heard as well. But also too, I want to preserve the existing communities that are here because I've come to love San Marcos, and that's why I've been here this far, and I plan to retire here. You know, I would like to make sure that the residents that have their homes here that may be needing some type of update to meet the standards or whatever the case may be, that we preserve what's already here. So those are my 3 reasons for being here.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Anything to add?
Yeah, actually. So I've been part of these discussions kind of in the region, in different communities, and it's a really difficult issue to address, and we have to address it because we cannot forget about any of our community members. I sit on the board for the Women's Center. We're currently doing a transitional housing project, $4 million for 18 units. It's a Band-Aid. But our clients cannot find safe, affordable housing, and that is in the rental market. That's not even in the ownership market, right? I like what Sean said, and I truly believe this as I've been parts of these conversations. I know that there is a desire, and it comes from a love of community and a love of neighborhood and a love of San Marcos. We are a culturally rich community. But to address this issue, we've got to push ourselves to get comfortable with things like density, right? And smaller units, and the way that we're looking at housing, because if we say we will only accept a solution that looks like the houses that we have on the ground today, right, where there's a lot and a house next to it, we're not going to solve this problem. And we need to address it through our policies at the city with accessory dwellings and access to that. I mean, there are so many things that we can be doing that are going to push us outside of our comfort zone. But density is one of those things. And Melissa, you talked about amenities being important because it creates a sense of community. When you have infill lots within your city, right, you don't have to amenitize those. The amenity is that you're part of that community by location and access. That's all of these valued communities. That's what they have in common, right? They're all part of our central district, our downtown area. And when you have an opportunity to add more housing in those areas, then you are automatically adding to your community. So that is I just want to push everybody here to think outside of the box because we have to address this issue.
Okay. All right.
I'm here because I need to know more about this subject just because of the nature of my work and working with families and the students of San Marcos CISD. We often get a lot of pushback between San Marcos student Bobcats and San Marcos SMCISD students. And oftentimes SMCISD students aren't necessarily at the forefront of the conversations, especially around housing. But because of my position, community attendance liaison, I work with a lot of families that struggle with providing housing for their children and their families. We have a lot of families that are host families. They're doubled up, and they've been doubled up for years, and they continue to be doubled up because they just can't afford a place of their own. I also am McKinney-Vento liaison, and McKinney-Vento, is the law that governs homeless education. And again, we get students and families that go homeless, and we have little recourse to be able to help them in the system, finding something that will get them to the next phase of their life that are going to become a little bit more stable. I've had experiences with families that have to contend with slumlords that are taking advantage of them, that beyond the rent that they owe them, they come and they ask for additional funding throughout the weeks and the months. So that's why I'm here. I'm wanting to see how I can learn from, this wealth of knowledge that exists here at this table, and then somehow contribute my thoughts as well on the process. And hopefully for the end to improve the lives of the families.
Great. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Southside Community Center has been involved in affordable housing for 32 years. We are in Choto. We have developed housing, as well as Albert has senior housing in the city of San Marcos, as well as working with all types of housing We do have the cheapest rentals units for seniors. We have a huge waiting list because it is the cheapest. But we also see young people that come in. Even my own secretary today asked me, is Martindale cheaper to live in than San Marcos? I need a rental unit. I can't afford one in San Marcos. This is really the crutch of the problem, is that you have young people and you have, whether they're mother with 3 kids who has to work. She said, I have to get a second job in order to afford an apartment in San Marcos. But you have young professionals that also come in. Amazon, we've got to have them. They provide jobs and economy to our city. Without them, we don't grow. We have to provide for their employees.
Right.
And we also have to recognize the contributions the city has given over the last, at least as long as I've been here, 32 years, because they've had first-time home buyer programs. They've also built affordable housing on both Armstrong and Georgia Street. They built 8 homes at one time. And so you come into a situation that the city is just urbanizing a tremendous amount. We can't lose our historical neighborhoods. Those are, to us, to people that have seen these neighborhoods almost all their lives, they're the most important thing to us. And you talk about El Barrio de Pesca, Victory Gardens, Sunset Acres, over by Chapultepec Apartments. Those neighborhoods, in our opinion, have to be protected. But as Roland said, there are a lot of different deals coming into play. And I was told the other day, that neighborhood's going to blow up. Well, no, the neighborhood's not going to blow up. They're going to build things in there, and all the people are going to have to move out because they're going to sell their houses because they can make a lot of money. What do you call that? Do you call that gentrification? I don't know what the heck you call it.
Yeah.
All I know is that we really need to work against that.
I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk about what.
I think I was only 1 minute. It was 5.
I'll come back to you in just a second. How about you?
My reason for being here is the fact that we do need affordable owner-occupied housing, much so. But we have these challenges that have been addressed already: poor credit, no credit, too much debt, and we need to find ways to overcome some of that. The Housing Authority, 4 or 5 years ago, we built 10 homes, and we were able to build them to a nonprofit by going out and getting bids on our own, soliciting bids from developers, contractors, and we built homes for close to $102,000, and we sold it for about 5% more. And those homes today are still being occupied by the people who bought them. And we didn't impose any kind of restrictions on them, and they stay there because they know they can't afford anywhere else. So we would like to continue to do the same. And we can only do that, again, if maybe the city provides some type of incentives to, single-family home construction like they do oftentimes to multifamily developers. That needs to be done. The other thing that I see is that we also need to maintain our existing stock here in San Marcos. The CDBG program that the city has, the CDBG DR that the city has, I see in some of that, I don't see a lot of monies being addressed to some of that, when very possibly all of it could be addressed to that.
Yeah,
But
to
no, we have a lot of money
stable
going to
neighborhoods.
infrastructure and things of that nature. But if we make the effort to go out and see what's out there, we might be able to maintain existing stock, buy abandoned structures, clear lots, and maybe create some of those properties to where we could build homes. And that's my interest, try to find some way to build houses for home ownership. I know that the Housing Authority cannot get into, we can't get any more rental properties, really. HUD is going out of that business. They're providing a lot of that assistance to the private sector through the Section 8 program, and we have some of those. But the Housing Authority itself cannot build any more public housing that benefits those folks that are at the bottom of the economic rung. We don't have that.
Okay.
But affordable housing, single family is most definitely something that we should
look for. Okay, sir.
So I grew up here in San Marcos, and I recently moved back home and spent the first part of my career in Austin with Frost Bank doing real estate development lending, primarily focused on residential housing for a long time, and it went into some of the situations where, for Habitat home buyers, and some of the organizations like Bert mentioned that were pre-qualifying people to get into affordable homes. So I think that's very important. Seeing the affordability piece in Austin get out of control, it's very disheartening. And I think, now that I'm home, I like to see us not get into that situation. And I'm glad that we're thinking ahead and trying to figure out solutions to that. And so with my expertise on the lending side, I contribute some knowledge on that end and seeing how I can contribute and make things better on.
Great, wonderful, wonderful. Sir?
We have all the pieces and all the places that we need to get the problem solved. The problem that I think we need to do is be open to everything that's at the table. Everybody has a different perspective and a different solution. We have nonprofits, we have organizations that can already handle it. The problem is capitalization and whatever intricacies within the government and nonprofits and stuff that are barriers to making those things happen and get them more resources. Because if you got 20 different groups trying to create affordable housing, that's 20 groups of people that are just wasted in an executive director, another committee, another person, another person, another person. We need to get that as efficient as we can so that we can get the people, the money, the actual stakeholders, the people that live in the community, they're going to end up living in the house. We need to get them as much of that resource as we can and make it as affordable as we can. Then they can actually help and be able to have a house that they can not only own, but they can maintain, and we can maintain a high quality of standard. Because we have a lot of stuff where we hand people the keys to stuff and it just turns into junk. It's just left to rot. And I like your ideas there as far as that goes. The city is always foreclosing, always gaining properties. We need to put it on the table. You have an old neighborhood, you have unsafe housing, this house is dilapidated, it doesn't meet present building codes. The city has already bought it for a fraction on the books. Get rid of it, but give it to a nonprofit so that it's put right back in and as affordable housing, right back into the market the way it was before, but it's modern, safe, and affordable, and it's taken care of that way. We can do it within that confines, but we have to have the right processes in order. And get rid of all the redundancies that we have. And that means everybody's kind of got to be willing to give up their little hegemony and just kind of like be willing to put that on the table. It could get something done if we were able to do that.
Great. I think we have a couple more over here.
I'm here to hopefully be able to support just from giving county perspective, because this issue it's countywide. It's not just here, but I'm glad that San Marcos is being so forward thinking. Also I am falling into a lot of these areas, so hopefully be able to give a perspective from that angle.
Okay, great.
You asked me why I'm here. I'm here out of a sense of personal responsibility. I work at the university, and I'm very blessed to get paid to do what I love. But the university has a profound impact on this community. And this community has a profound impact on the university. And being a part of this conversation is very important, not only for folks living today, not only this dynamic affecting their lives, but also future generations. Accumulation of capital, being able to create stable neighborhoods. This affects us today and generations. The university's not going anywhere, and San Marcos is not going anywhere. So very responsible and important.
Great. Well, as you can see, we've got a diverse group here, a lot of different points of view, a lot of passion and interest in this topic, so I'm really excited about that. I took notes of what everyone was saying. There's a few things that directly correlate to those goals that I want to take a crack at, interjecting some wording in there. Wondered if, for the sake of time, if you will trust me to do that. These will not be written in stone after this meeting. They won't be written in stone ever, but they will be written on paper for consideration by council a year from now. So lots of time to kind of massage them. But I would like a chance to take your input and leave it in there and show that to you the next time for your thumbs up, if that's okay. Because there's a couple things, and I want to get you out the door on time. There's a couple things we want to cover right before you leave. You're going to have a little bit of homework between now and the next meeting, which is in days that help achieve the goals that we will send out to you and refine in a couple days. And that needs to be, sent back before the next meeting, so that will be part of the conversation as we understand what's already happening in San Marcos, and we can kind of go from there as we consider strategies for advancing the efforts around workforce housing. So those are your homeworks: nomination, reviewing the goals as I refine them and send them to you, and then also inventorying your own sphere of influence from companies or neighborhoods to see what's been done. Okay? The next meeting we've targeted for December is a tricky month. I always know it's hard to get everybody together. This time, I assume, will work the best. It's kind of a noon to 2 time slot for everybody. Any particular days of week that we should avoid? This is a Thursday. We got a great turnout. I'm thinking that's a good day, but unless you all tell me that's not. Okay. We'll look for a Thursday in early December to send out another invite for a Thursday lunch meeting. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, the next, so at the next meeting, we will be, we have these goals that we will refine and send to you. We'll be talking about strategies to help with each and every goal, some of which are already happening because you will have inventoried them, and we will be doing our own inventory as well in the meanwhile. So we'll pepper in there what's already being done, and then we'll discuss gaps and how to fill those with other strategies. And it's still essentially a no judgment zone yet when we're brainstorming strategies. At the following meetings, we'll be prioritizing and we'll start to see where the real energy, passion, and focus needs to be moving forward. But we want to be comprehensive for a little bit and put in strategies that are created out of the box, just very big ideas. And that will happen at the next meeting. So hopefully you'll come all prepared for that. Any questions about the process? Yes, sir.
The chair and vice chair, do they meet more often than the general membership?
Good question. I should have mentioned that. Good question. The vision for the chair and vice chair is to attend the council committee meetings and report activity of the task force in the case that the committee members weren't there. And to let them know kind of the direction we're headed. Here are the goals, here are the vision statements. You will have all the support you need from staff and myself, so don't think you have a lot of work to do. You are there to be the bridge from this group to the council committee. In addition, down the road, when there is a blueprint and it goes before council, you will be the spokesperson for that as well. Meanwhile, for the meetings, we will call them to order. We will go over agendas with you. You can help us kind of get that clarified pre each meeting. And yes.
Question probably for Abby. I'm sorry if I missed it, about the housing study. Timeline on that, and then also I'm glad there's a representative here from the county. Do you feel, and I'm sure that housing study will primarily focus on San Marcos and city limits, but do you feel that will also address issues in Hays County and also neighboring counties and then the region?
Absolutely. I think anytime housing is a regional issue, it's not, we can't talk about housing within terms of city limits. So yes, we'll absolutely be looking at housing and how we fit into the region. We're talking about demographics and mobility of people, people moving throughout this region a lot. So that'll be a big part of it.
And timeline for the study, what do you?
Yes, timeline, we're hoping to have contracts through council in October, which will mean that for this next December meeting, hopefully that sort of speaker series segment there will be us able to deliver some of the first thoughts from the housing study.
Thank you very much.
So I have a question, like in regards to, say we want some information as into stuff that the city has either in the past or is considering researching on, possible grants or possible partnerships, that kind of stuff. Is that something that as a committee member we would have to put forth through the chair or vice chair, and then they would direct that to the staff, or is it something, and the only reason I'm asking is because of the, the gaps between each meeting. So like, if I was interested in something, would I have to reach out to the chair and tell the chair, hey, can you let them know? Or would I be able to directly make that communication and contact with staff?
Yep, you can communicate directly with me. We don't follow open meetings rules. You don't have to worry about that, walking forms, any of those kinds of things. This is publicly open, but you don't have to worry about those things.
Okay.
Yep. Please talk amongst yourselves and work together as a task force about worrying about that, and then you can communicate directly with me.
Would it be helpful for the committee to know about affordable housing projects already in the works?
Yes, and that's
Like I
part
know
of
the
city
county,
authority.
just approved a housing workforce subdivision. They came specifically and said that's exactly what they were.
Yes.
And I don't know enough about it. I reviewed the county meeting and saw that they approved it. And so I don't know if it's a tax credit project or a home project, but it'd be interesting to know
That's great.
how big a project
That
it
is
is.
a great example of the kind of inventory that Homework's about here, as we want the county to tell us about what you all have been doing to address the goals that we're going to resend once we can refine them a little bit, and talk about, how did this help with one of those goals? So yes, all of those would be great. Okay, any other questions? Whew, we got you out just all right on time. That's going to be my goal every time. So we look forward to seeing you in December, and we'll be in contact in the next few days with a reminder for your nomination and your homework assignment. Thank you so much.